gang gang.
In today's lesson, we will be learning about multicultural education and its impact. Module 19 of the Educational Psychology textbook explores multicultural education, and today you will be able to do the following. Before we go any further into our lesson today, I want all of my students to think about the following two questions. Do you want your students to succeed? And what can you do to ensure the success of every student that you teach? Please talk with your partners to figure out your answers. The definition of multicultural education is a process of school reform and education for everyone. This way of education defies stereotypes and racial bias. There are several approaches to multicultural education, and while we are discussing a few today, it is agreed that there is not a best approach for multicultural education. While I believe it's outdated, some educators may not even believe in multicultural education for a variety of reasons. Like the textbook and the information on the screen states, there is a percentage of young students who have urgent needs and they do not receive the help that they need. While it is a small percentage, it is important to note that teachers should care for all students. The students that need help may come from different cultural backgrounds from you, and then it is vital to understand how to best approach their situation in a culturally sensitive way. Also on the screen it states that about 30% of the population are immigrants to the U.S., so many of your students could be from a different background than you. Personally, I work in a retail store in the suburb of Houston, and every day I see people of different backgrounds. I've heard Arabic, Portuguese, Norwegian, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese spoken in our store. Continuing with that idea, the way each culture interacts in the store is also very different. Many people from Spanish cultures travel with their whole families to the store, while many people of Asian backgrounds shop alone. Culturally relevant pedagogy is a way to bring in multicultural education into the classroom. This way of teaching particularly focuses on students of color and students in poverty. In general, pedagogy is a belief and/or beliefs that set the foundation of how a teacher teaches his or her students. In this case, cultural relevant pedagogy is a practice that is founded on teachers having a cultural understanding for every background that they teach. Fairly recently, Gloria Lamson-Billings established culturally relevant pedagogy. There are three components to the pedagogy. First, students must experience academic success. This means that students have to develop academic skills despite what life throws at them. Secondly, cultural competence must be displayed. This goes for both students and teachers. As students grow in their learning, they must stay true to their roots, and teachers must use those roots to be able to teach students in the best way possible. Last but not least, the status quo has to be challenged. As students grow, they must be able to think outside of their own opinions to question social norms. Personally, I feel like the last component would be the most difficult to teach, and it couldn't occur unless the other two components were completed. What is the main idea of this type of teaching practice? The purpose of this practice is to teach all students regardless of their background. In this method, teachers can acknowledge the challenge some students face, however they believe in their students so they all can succeed. On the other hand, students often look for a secure relationship with their teachers as well as having school to be a safe environment. In a resilient classroom, there are two agents: self-agency and connected relationships. In self-agency, students have the capacity to pursue goals. Connected relationships, students feel a bond between the teacher and themselves. Note that the last part of a resilient classroom was not in the PowerPoint, so make sure you get that written down. While this next topic isn't really considered a pedagogy, it is still relevant to the topic at hand. Roland Tharp outlined the dimensions in classrooms that teachers need to understand in order to tailor their classrooms to best reflect the diversity. The four outlined are social organization, cultural values, learning preferences, and socio-linguistics. Each of the four are different, however they are linked together in unique ways. Social organization is how people work with each other to complete a task. Every culture is different in the way that they view social structure. In a study completed in 2001, Hawaiian children were paired together in groups. After these groups were established, learning improved. This was due to the fact that in Hawaiian culture, they value group work and collaboration. However, this is not true for all cultures. It is important that educators can understand this idea so they can best fit their students in social settings. As teachers, you may have to play around with groups and various collaboration ideals to find the best fit for your classroom. Learning preferences is how you best learn based on your cultural values. Cultural values and learning preferences are closely related. As for the definition of cultural values, it is defined as the core principles that make up your community. As research suggests, different groups value different things. For example, Hispanic American students value family, and therefore they work best in groups rather than competing against their peers. Another example would be that Native American students tend to have a global visual style of learning rather than an analytical approach. This means that students prefer to hear a whole story before discussing it. While this research is wonderful, there are 2 points to think about. All research may not be valid, and there is a debate on whether educators should identify racial groups in order to best serve them. This can be seen as racist and dangerous. We can see the differences as flaws and view them negatively. With this being said, it is important to understand each individual that you are encountering. On a side note, the disagreement with multicultural education seems to lead into another topic that is popular in the education field: equality versus equity. Equality is the state of being equal in value and/or opportunities. Equity refers to the proportional representation in regards to different topics. If student A is doing well on his own and student B is not, the teacher might give more attention to student B to get where student A is. This is considered equity. Student A worked on his own to get where he is standing academically, while student B needed that extra help. This can be intertwined with multicultural education. Before we go into our last little bit, I want to make sure you have notes written down about learning preferences, cultural values, and social organization. All of these are important to see in your classroom. Not only are they important to see in academic settings, you can see it in your daily life if you have a job, go to church with people of different backgrounds, and/or in social settings. Understanding these ideas will help you become not only a better educator, but a better communicator as well. If you don't understand why a person is acting the way they are, you can look for differences in cultural values and other ideals we discussed previously in the lesson. Sociolinguistics is how people communicate across cultures. Understanding this idea is key to figuring out why there are breaks in communication sometimes in the classroom. Sometimes the sociolinguistics of certain students do not meet the standards of the teacher, and this causes an issue. In order for students to understand the teacher's expectations, they have to understand the pragmatics of the classroom. This means that they have to understand how and when to communicate. This is not an easy thing to teach. In order to teach this idea, teachers must structure the classroom in a certain way to have students understand the routine and/or goals. In conclusion, it is vital for teachers to be able to do the following things: teach every student, know every student, and respect every student. This can be remembered with the acronym TKR. To teach your students is to challenge them to learn academic skills such as reading, writing, thinking, and creating. However, teachers should not lower their standards for certain racial groups and/or at-risk students. This takes the challenge out of school. In order to avoid this issue, teachers should know their students. To know your student is to understand what they bring to the classroom. Like what has been said earlier in the lesson, every student is different. And last but not least, respect your students. From knowing these children, respect must follow. We as educators have to understand their struggles and believe in our students. Sometimes we may be the only person that believes in them. To me, that idea is truly special, and I hope all of you can do that. That is the end of the lesson. However, I want to review some topics that were discussed, but they were not on the PowerPoint. These ideas will be on your next exam. First, you must know the characteristics of a resilient classroom. Then you must know the difference between equality and equity. While this idea wasn't specifically stated in Module 19, knowing the difference will be relevant to your future. Last but not least, you must understand why communication breaks down and know how to apply pragmatics to my test questions. It'll either be a SpongeBob question or a Little Mermaid question. Haven't decided yet, gang. We have just completed the lesson over multicultural education, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to be able to discuss your thoughts and opinions on this view of teaching. The class will be divided into two. The left side of the class is for multicultural education, and the right side of the class is against multicultural education. You will be given 5 minutes to talk with your group, and then 3 minutes to write down all the reasons for your opinions. The group with the most valid points written down will earn themselves 3 extra bonus points for this semester.